things that tempt us, we're dealing with our biochemistry, we're dealing with our neuroanatomy, we're dealing with our genetic cocktail that makes us up, and we're dealing with the spiritual condition. Why does this excite us? Because this. Religious people, when we talk temptation, we tend to go all spiritual. It's just over-spiritualizing something. Now, I'm not saying there isn't the spiritual side to this, because of course there is. Temptation is the spiritual battle and struggling. But the fact is, if we disregard our bodies, our human anatomy, we are disregarding, we are becoming ignorant on the very battlefield on which this is being fought. So if there's a lesson in all of this, I'll start right with the punchline of the whole thing, is know thyself. Know thyself. Know what we are dealing with when we talk about temptation. In all of this, your faith walk, your soul, your mind, your body are all interlinked. One influences the other, one affects the other, and it all comes together in this battle. And nowhere is it more illustrated than in temptation. And nowhere are science and religion the flip side of the same coin than we deal with temptation. We're starting in the biological side of temptation because that's where it all happens to start with. So in this, this is where my box of dirt comes in. So, think of it, I'm sure there's some smart line will come to your mind. Think of this box of dirt as your mind. Well, that's almost too easy right there. Some people feel like they got a head full of sand, or a dirty mind. But the idea is probably, as I understand anyway, that probably the number of granules of dirt that are in here, of sand, are probably about the same as the number of synapses we have in our head. And the way it works is with these synapses is, let's say this is the current traveling through your mind. You can see, as I draw a line through there, a little groove. It's a pretty good analogy in the way that they found in the synapses in your head. When you do something in that particular pathway, the resistance, the electrical resistance, becomes a little less every time that's traveled. So you can see where that's going. Eventually, you'll end up with a kind of a habits. But think of this as the first time you do something. There it is, a pathway. Now you come back. We'll say this is the electrical current here. This is the actual thoughts going on. And as it happens, here it is, it went down. The water tends to follow that pathway, but you can see it's kind of going other ways too. And that's kind of what happens when we first do something. We kind of get an idea of how to do something, and we may or may not do it the same way the next time. But let's say there's a particular problem you're wrestling with. Have you ever done this? You're dealing with it, and it seems every time you go back to it, it's like you're on a hamster wheel. It just you end up with the same type of logic or a habit you start to keep. Well, it makes sense because if this is your brain, and here's how you thought about that thing the first time, and then you do the same thing again, and you thought about it, and this etches in your brain. It's getting deeper and deeper. Each time you repeat the process, the resistance and the neurons get less and less, and it gets deeper and deeper. Well, what's going to happen there? Well, as you think now, it gets etched deep enough that the current can't help but travel that path. It's all of that now. When that happens, if it's a good desire, it's a good thing. You've developed a good habit. Bob said, you may want to work this in. I think I will. Bob had a great illustration. He said, muscle memory, the same thing. You're training your brain to reflex in a certain way when you perform a certain action. As I understand, Bob says like 800 times, if you repeat 800 times, dig in your little trough, then you'll have the muscle memory. But if you want to undo it, 1,600 times. So it is possible. But you can see where in a good desire, if it's a good desire, it's working for you. If it's a bad desire, man, you're not only fighting the spiritual battle, you're physically fighting the electrical currents in your head. It's a physiological problem as well. And you've literally dug yourself a hole which now you have to dig out of. So in this battle of temptation, physiologically, there is something going on. And of course, we can combine other factors in there if we were so to talk about them. There's your genetic disposition. Everybody is disposed to certain strengths and weaknesses. Your temptation may not be mine may not be yours, but whatever it is, and we dig our little trough, that's what's going on in our heads. Is it so surprising that even when you know something is not good to do, you can't help yourself and you keep doing it? But maybe the big question now is, why are you tempted in the first place? Why is something like your mind that is this tremendous system, this tremendous design that can shoot off these impulses and bring thoughts and all kinds of things happen to you so quickly, how does it end up off track so easily, where it will have the wrong temptations come at it? The whole concept of the first part, the creation of man, is this. We were designed perfectly. Then mankind that existed decided to break the relationship with the designer. And what happened was the creation didn't stop working. It continued to function, but in a skewed kind of way. And if we look at what happens in our minds, that's exactly what happens. We will do things that harm us. Why would we do that? The mind itself will create its own suffering. It will take a path to do that. Why do we do that? Well, if we talk in theological terms, it's called our fallen nature. It's the sin nature. It is our broken relationship with the one who created the design in the first place. And nowhere is it more true than in the more foundational, the more basic the desire is, like eating and the drinking and procreation, the more basic it is to the human nature. When it is twisted, of course, the greater the impact is going to be. Just like a house, if you ruin the foundation, the rest of the house is going to pay the price. The battle is fought in our heads. The battle is fought in the wiring. And it is so easy for the wiring, because of our fallen nature, to get off course if we're not very, very careful. Brings a whole new meaning to what James warns us, doesn't it, in the book of James. And remember, when someone wants to do wrong, it is never God who is tempting him, for God never wants to do wrong and never tempts anyone else to do wrong. Temptation is the pull of man's own evil thoughts and wishes. James 1:13-14. It's our own bodies, our own minds that we're fighting against. One thing I want to pull out from this too is that all temptations aren't created equal. This whole thing on sexual temptation, if you look through both Old and New Testament, you find this almost has a category of its own, sexual temptation, in this basic desire that can go astray. But anyways, in 1 Corinthians 6:18, it says, that is why I say to run from sexual sin. And then it says, no other sin affects the body as this one does. No other sin. So it's kind of a special category going on here. With this sin, it is a sin against your own body. It's this category. So let's just, for a moment, reiterate what's so special about this particular temptation. Well, as we said, we all have a sexual identity. It's part of our basic human experience. Intimacy is a prime need. Intimacy, both emotionally and physical. It's amazing for all the technology and all the new toys that get developed. So many of them, love songs are still written the same as 2,000 years ago. They're all about intimacy, about being next to some person. We're wired for it. It is in there. And as wonderful as all of this is, since it is so basic, once it gets twisted, it's like the frame of your car. Once it's twisted, the whole car pays the price. Is that really true? Does sex really, and the temptation of sexual sin, really, the desire, when it's twisted, really, do we pay such a price? Well, I don't just want to come up here and claim something. So going back and looking at studies, scientific studies, surveys, here's some things you'll find with our current culture. Something called the Alfred Kinsey studies found that 50% of males and 26% of females in the United States have an adulterous affair at least once in their lifetime. Connect the dots with this. Presently, there is a divorce in America every 13 seconds. That comes out to over 46,000 divorces, 46,000 ruined homes and families every week. The average couple, the age, young, 30 years old. This is going on. Then in this temptation, since it's so strong, we have not one but multiple industries that are specifically designed to target, to deepen our sexual desire, and then to even turn it into an addiction of some kind. And these industries permeate every level of society, every context. They go so far as using every means of technology available to mankind. It's being used. And they even go so far as to enslave innocent people as sexual commodities. It is a dangerous, powerful business. Just the porn movie industry alone, just the movies that come out from California, these movies alone are so lucrative that the annual income grosses more than the fast food, restaurant, and bar businesses combined. There's a lot of money in a twisted desire. It is a powerful thing. But like we said, there's a price to be paid. There's no such thing as a happy ending to an affair. Everyone who is enslaved to pornography, it's not a happy situation to be in. In fact, in the whole sex industry, whether you're the provider or you're the consumer, both are held in bondage. So much so does this go on that our culture considers it pretty much a norm now. Some pretty serious problems when these neurons get fired in the wrong way, isn't it? Well, what does the Bible say? As we now look at the background, the designer made us this way. That's what's going on in my head and your head right now. You're having a thought right now, one way or the other, an impression or whatever, and it is all with the pathways in which your mind is being fired. What does the Bible say about all of this stuff anyway? What does it say particularly about sexual temptation? And in temptation, maybe as I started, ending with the same line, know thyself. When we deal with temptation, especially indulged, we're fighting our own internal wiring physically as much as we are fighting a spiritual battle. Does it not make sense to wire right so you don't have to go through the trouble of rewiring? The greatest defense against temptation, the greatest defense against temptation that is wrong is to have a passionate vision for what is right. That is what Scripture would tell us.